Hey everyone, my name's Adam and I lead product here at Prefect. Super excited to have Vishal Killa, a staff engineer at Rent the Runway, joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about how Rent the Runway uses Prefect and dbt together. We're going to start zoomed out. We're going to talk a little about the business context of Rent the Runway and some of the use cases that Vishal and his team have been using to marinate Prefect and dbt together to make data operations run really smoothly. And so I know Rent the Runway is a household name, but Vishal would love to hear a little bit about your experience at Rent the Runway. Really appreciate you joining us here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Vishal. I'm a staff engineer at Rent the Runway. I've been working at the company for almost 3 years in data engineering capacity. A little about Rent the Runway. Rent the Runway is a rental clothing company which allows you to rent in multiple ways. Either you can have a subscription, or you can reserve, or you can buy some also stuff depending on what your use case is. So it offers from everyday clothing to special events, be it prom, be it event, office wear, and it primarily deals with the high-end designer clothes. So more or less the data which we deal with is all related to fashion-related data, but in different domains also. This is what you use on the website, but given the business, we have a big warehouse operation where all the clothes go and everything. So there's a lot of labor warehouse data, then a marketing data that comes in, a lot of finance data, almost all the data which you will see in different kind of companies you work with, but that's the primary what Rent the Runway data
Yeah,
involves.
that sounds like a massive amount of data of a lot of different types. And I'm sure that taming and making sense of that data and putting it to use is a totally non-trivial endeavor. Do you want to, maybe to that end, do you want to talk a little bit about what's your data stack overall, and where does Prefect and dbt fit into it?
Absolutely. A little bit about historical context. We used to use Rundeck back in the days. From that Rundeck, we moved to Prefect V1, and now we are migrating to Prefect V2. So the tech stack kind of currently looks like we use Prefect, dbt as our transformation tool. We kind of follow the ELT paradigm. So Prefect, dbt, Snowflake are our main three tools we use here. Apart from that, AWS is our cloud for our data team specifically at this point in time, and some what tooling comes in CI/CD and DevOps. We use Docker containerizing a lot and GitHub Actions for all our CI/CD purposes.
Got it. Got it. Maybe just to double click, how do you use Prefect and dbt together specifically? How, in your experience, how do they complement each other?
Absolutely. So as I said, like these two tools are quite integral to all our pipelines. Prefect is our main orchestration tool in data world, and dbt is our main transformation tool that powers almost everything. I'll take a step back to just define the team I'm in, just to give you more ideas. So I'm a data engineer team. We have our data org, which comprises of data engineering, business intelligence, machine learning, data science team, and DBA. So my stakeholders being a data engineer are primarily these teams here, for whom I write pipelines, serve them data, and from there on, these teams work downstream further with their stakeholders. So talking about that, and the reason the context setting up the stage for that is wherever we use dbt, it transforms the data from end to end. Once the data loads into Snowflake, we use dbt primarily to build all the downstream models till the end, where Looker comes in, which is our visualization tool, which is what the whole business looks at. If anything in that in that dashboard looks not correct, that's where we trace it back to dbt most of the time, or upstream time. That's a overall thing. Now going into details how things move around in terms of data and where Prefect comes in. So we ingest data into Snowflake from multiple sources. That also, most of the time, I would say almost all the pipelines, we use Prefect to ingest. That can be our transactional database, our third-party APIs, any other vendors, internal sources. All of them does come via Prefect, or some other mechanism, but most of them via Prefect. Once the data loads into Snowflake, when it comes, then we run dbt pipe jobs, which will transform data from point A till point Z, which powers our visualization tool. Now, this is the part where Prefect and dbt are coming, and how do we use Prefect to orchestrate our dbt is in a way that we have a one flow, which is kind of our parameterized dbt flow, and to which you can basically pass any arguments, which if you are running locally, you will pass through dbt run. So that flow is quite parameterized, and people have different flows based on what dbt is there. Here I'll take a step back to define our dbt landscape a little. We have been using dbt for almost, I believe, 5 years here. So over the years, a lot of technical debt, a lot of projects, and everything has grown. But right now we have around 30 to 40 dbt projects with around 1800 of models or tables that are being built using dbt on different cadence, be it like frequency depending on the requirements. So now coming back to Prefect, as I said, we have one flow which we use to run all these models and everything. So that flow basically, whatever commands you pass, the flow, the way it works is basically, since we run everything in ECS, something which I missed earlier, our everything is containerized. Everything runs in ECS, so there's a separation of pipelines, nothing impacts the other pipeline and everything. So our flow kind of has this way where starts off, get some ECS metadata for the observability into our AWS stuff, what's happening in there. Then it composes commands which we need to run for dbt. We run, test, seed, and everything. In the order of running things, it runs all those commands, and at the end of our flow, it uploads metadata files, documents to our S3, where we serve for the documentation purpose as well as powering our data catalog tool. And that's our main use case for Prefect, which runs almost all our dbt jobs on a cadence, whatever's required.
Yeah, cool. So it sounds like you're using dbt as like a core transformation tool to help with data quality, but you're leaning a bit more on Prefect for like core orchestration work, to make things easily automated, or since you can easily parameterize workflows, it gives you a lot of flexibility. Maybe to make things a bit more tangible, like I know that you said that you had a couple of tangible examples that you wanted to dive into, to maybe better illustrate this in more detail.
Absolutely. So, just going for the simpler examples, for example, one of the things which we use for our internal, this is kind of like a flow which we work with our business stakeholders more than the data team. Data teams are very well aware how to use dbt, Prefect, and everything. But for example, our other business teams, they want some data from Google Sheets to be ingested into Snowflake. And based on that data, once ingested, it's kind of a similar concept which you have in like dbt seed. But again, for that, the workflow had to be defined. For now, for example, we have G Sheets where our other business stakeholders add some data on whatever cadence they want. Once they have the data, then they talk to our team that, oh, can we ingest this data? Or it can be automated depending whatever the requirements are. So they upload the data in G Sheets. We, via Prefect, we have, as I said, we had the dbt flow parameterized. We have another flow which is very much parameterized to just ingest data from Google Sheets into Snowflake. So we run that flow, which kind of moves data from Google Sheets into Snowflake. Now, since this is the source data, very raw data, which you're ingesting from G Sheets, and we have no way of knowing the quality and how data was there, this is where again dbt comes in for us, that we have defined this test on this source data using, for example, dbt's package called dbt expectations. So all the fields, all the columns which are coming in, there's a bunch of validation happening in Prefect flow also, as well as in dbt. So as soon as the file is loaded into Snowflake, we run that source test against the source database, source table. If it all good looks, then further another dbt downstream models kind of get executed. So this is a very one simple example how we use it with external stakeholders. By external, I mean just not related to data org people, other people who want data ingested into Snowflake. Second example could be, so we have data, since we said we ingest a lot of data from our internal services a lot. So for example, one of the services we ingest data from is our membership services. Now the data comes through, there are a lot of downstream models that depend on that, and a lot of dashboards and people who look into this data a lot. Somewhere between last year, there were problems running into some data issues where the upstream pipelines failed. They were not timely. That impacted our SLA, and we wanted to have some data test on those critical metrics or in our critical models. So what we did was basically here in our dbt models, we have those generic tests also, some data tests, some which we needed on those specific data tables and columns. We had those tagged as critical, and now we have, for example, Prefect flow, which you can run the whole dbt flow from end to end, or you can use it to just run the tests also. So that flow kind of runs once a day checks against those specific tables, specific models, runs those tests, which are tagged as critical. Once it's run, it creates kind of a summary and it sends a Slack and email to our upstream teams, which is like membership team here, to see, all right, is there any data missing? Is there any issue with the data here? And also some other teams. So that kind of informs us. Yes, the checks potentially could have been upstream also, but given, as I said earlier, the technical debt and everything, this was kind of a good solution. We came in that, all right, data team can do this, and let's use our tooling, which we have right now, to generate something.
Got it. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. It sounds like you use it a lot for like, I've got messy primary source data, and so how do I perform a flow of like doing data quality checks so that when I get clean, trusted data, I can like turn the dbt crank to materialize some final data product for folks to consume with high trust. That makes a ton of sense. So maybe then like, do you want to talk about like what's the journey been of adopting a tool like Prefect? Like where have you seen the primary benefit of it, and maybe like how have you been thinking about the evolution of your data stack altogether?
I'll talk into things like lately we have been going through the migration. So like from Prefect 1 to Prefect 2 is going on still at our end. And then similar, one thing is happening here. And in Prefect 1, the dbt version which we were on was 1.4. And in Prefect 2, I was working on, I upgraded the version to 1.8. So we have both versions going on with two different versions, and we are trying to migrate it all to this thing. And that being said, I'm just going to focus on V2 and 1.8 and how we are planning, like how this has helped and how are we going to leverage this. Prefect V2 has helped us with a lot of things in terms of like simplified deployments, which wasn't the case in V1. Deployments are much simpler to put for any flow. For example, as I said, dbt is one of our most used flows given the number of projects and selectors or YAML selectors in terms of dbt parlance we use. So now it's much easier to manage the number of deployments we have for just the dbt flow and how it works. That is thing number one. Second thing, within dbt now, 1.8, there some new stuff has come up, which is like data contracts can be there. We can include all the data types and data contracts as there with model access, that who can access this specific model or table or project. Because back in the days we used to face cross-project dependencies. Those kind of things are there in V2. So I'm hoping, sorry, not V2, but 1.8 of dbt. So with these migration, I'm hoping to have better understanding of the data models we have. As I earlier said, we have 1800 models, and those were all spread across 30 projects. And we are working on consolidating them into manageable number of projects, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 1, I do not know yet, but we are all consolidating to get a better picture of the number of models we have, the number of data sources we use to avoid the cross-project dependencies, and how can we make better data models and simplify our data models, because 1800 is a big number for things which now has just accumulated over the years and everything.
Yeah, not super surprised that at your guys' scale that you've got something like 1,800 dbt models. Yeah, especially for the size of data you guys are working with. So maybe like one last thing here is, you know, Prefect, we publish an official Prefect dbt integration. I know this is something that you played around with a little bit. Would love to learn a bit about your experience or sort of more broadly your thoughts on it.
Absolutely. I believe the reason we didn't use Prefect DB integration since we came in V1 at that time, it wasn't that mature. Now, when I looked at it recently, it has matured a lot. It has some things which are there. So we do have a bespoke, our own flow. And the reason we created our way of parameterizing it was we were doing more other things which were not there in the integration back in the days. One of the things which I liked, which a new integration has, was kind of uploading the artifacts. So whenever you run, and since we run a lot of dbt runs running every hour or whatever the cadence they're running on, every dbt run generates some kind of metadata that, all right, how many number of models were running, what kind of test ran, what was the percentage of tests passed or failed. Right now, what I have to do is go into the logs to look at that data and what failed and everything. But with the new thing where it's like you can upload the artifact as like a markdown to Prefect 2, where it kind of shows you high level for each run what's happening. And that is just a small goal towards getting more into observability. Right now, what we lack is observability of our pipelines, that what is happening and where is happening. I'm also working on POC of another tool, open source, which might help with this thing, where we kind of like build this observability that how much each model is taking, what tests are failing, and have some more rigorous tests on this, and kind of push that as a somewhere as a report that every day these things ran, this much failed, this failed for this reason, this model took this time. On average over the last 14 days it was taking 10 minutes, today it took 15 minutes. So kind of more observability into our data models, and where we can improve our data models, and where can we reduce the time. And there can be multiple factors why it's slow, fast, and everything. Query optimization might be required, changing the size of warehouse, changing the cadence of the frequency of the pipeline we are running. So multiple factors, but that's a goal there. Yeah.
Yeah. I get it that observability is obviously like such a killer feature here. You often just like can't fix a problem you can't measure. So maybe just like zooming out for a second. So there are a lot of folks here listening today that are really trying to, who are interested in using Prefect and dbt together. You've used them together a ton, and so do you have any advice for folks that are here today, like that are about to start this? Like, what advice would you have for them?
Absolutely. Again, for me, like I would say, like that has been a critical thing. Like right now, there's no other way for us to run DBT except Prefect, and it has helped us a lot in terms of running all our pipelines and powering our almost all analytics through Prefect. So my advice is to be like, again, the solutions can differ here a lot. The solution which fit us was creating our own bespoke kind of a runner flow, or which allows us to run things the way we want it to run. That might help people because it's just not one thing we want to run with the DB runner flow. Sometimes you want to run tests separately. Sometimes you want to run seeds separately. Sometimes you want to just do the documentation. So our flow kinds of allow that flexibility of whatever people want to run it as, it allows. At the same time, the question comes, do you want to maintain that flow now all the time? So that maintenance comes at the cost. Like if I change something in that flow, it's going to impact all my pipelines which are using dbt. That where you can look into the dbt integration thing, prefect dbt integration, because we know that like that integration will be maintained and managed by prefect, and that might make it easier for you to work with it than having your own flow. So I will say just weighing those things, that what will make more sense for the business right now. Do you want to manage something on your own, having all your own things containerized, dependencies there, or do you want to go with the integration? If I were to go back, maybe for some things I would change my decision that let's use the integration rather than generating, not for specifically for dbt here, but in general also, because it's just who's going to manage, and the management cost is always an overhead for developers to update things, make sure things are working fine. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's great advice, right? It's like that age-old question of like, how much do you want to trade off like flexibility and maintainability? I can tell you've thought about this problem a lot. So Vishal, I gotta say, like, really appreciate your time here. I definitely learned a lot. I hope folks listening did as well. Just like a lot of great insights and hard-earned experience of marrying together Prefect and dbt, and why you found it as like such core constituents of your stack. So Vishal, really appreciate your time here. Thanks so much.
No, thank you so much for having me, and I would be happy to, like, if anyone's interested in Prefect dbt, the way we run it, I'd be happy to help with that also. I'm active in the Prefect and dbt communities in general on Slack, so happy to be.